What is going on, guys? Jack here, and welcome back to episode 3 of The Rise of a Nation, here with FC Edmonton in the Canadian Premier League. Yes, hopefully you guys are doing fantastic. We're back again, and I thought today we'd take a look at the hierarchy to start things here at FC Edmonton, because with it being a newly formed club, it's kind of interesting just seeing how the players are falling into place in this big pyramid. So, well, unsurprisingly, Tommy Ameobi is one of the highly influential players at the club. At 30 years old, he has just signed a new contract, and the reason for doing that is that his contract was expiring at the end of 2019. What year is this? 2019, his contract was expiring, and because of that, and the fact that we are now in June already, because of how late the Canadian season started, it meant he had the option to, have clubs approach him to, sign him for nothing come the end of his contract. So I needed to nip that in the bud. It feels kind of weird so soon into a season having to do these contract negotiations, and over the next few years, I feel like it might be kind of interesting to see how that plays out, because if we just look at things here, we've played 7 games in the league this year, a couple of cup games as well. But basically, I'm having to make judgment calls on which of my first team players I want to renew the contracts of 10 games into a season of about 40 or so games, which is an unusually early, time to be making those kind of calls. Across the board for this first season, what I've actually ended up doing is renewing the contracts of pretty much everyone, at least until the end of next year. I feel like I'm relatively happy with this squad that we've got here. They're slowly starting to form some social groups, although it will come with a little bit of time perhaps, and everyone is pretty happy right now, which is really good to be able to see. You can see here, Marcelin and Moses are on international duty right now. That is not very good at all. They're both away with their respective national teams for the American Gold Cup. I think is it the Gold Cup? I now want to make sure this is right. Yeah, the North American Gold Cup, which is going on this summer. We don't have an international break like some of the other countries around this, so we only lose 2 players, fortunately. But over coming years, this might become a tournament that could potentially be a thorn in our side. But anyway, that's a little bit about the hierarchy. We're now going to talk finally about the staff and what we did at the club when I first came in. I realised this is something that I touched upon in the first episode, kind of wanted to talk about it sooner, but I wanted to do it justice. And I feel like the best person to start with, actually, when it comes to our staff, is our assistant manager, because when I came into FC Edmonton, obviously I inherited Jeff Paulus, the real-life manager's backroom staff. There were 1 or 2 of those people who I did end up keeping on, but I really tried to bulk things out. The game was very encouraging, with all the slots it had open for new coaches, new scouts, new physios, to really overhaul the backroom staff, and that's what we did. So actually the first player we signed, and I say player rather than staff member, was Dwayne De Rosario, who is a legend of, Canadian international football. If we just look at his information here, you can see 81 caps for Canada. I'd say that's pretty good going. I believe in real life he retired, and in this database, because there was rumours basically that he joined the Canadian Premier League. He was playing indoor football at an amateur level. That's my understanding of it. But obviously you can see here he's had quite an experienced career. He's now come to us after his retirement as a player. Now he is in the under-21s. I don't intend to ever play him, but the reason for bringing him in was just how good he is as an assistant manager for this level. Great man management, great judging player ability and potential, and obviously a really complete knowledge of both Canada and the USA was pretty beneficial. So a really nice addition as our assistant. As a player, not really going to be using him, but Darrow, just a great person to have there. We also brought in Erwin van der Berg to be our head of youth development. Again, really the benchmark with our staff was around 13. And across the board, that's kind of what we've tried to go with. You can see here, we've got 3 scouts, we've got an under-21s coaching setup, a senior coaching setup, a fairly fleshed out medical team as well, which is great. Just in terms of the overall quality of our coaches, if we look here, you can kind of see it could be better, but we don't have a load of coaches, so there's some specialisation there. The main thing for me personally is the fact that the workloads are largely pretty light across the board. We have focus in all these different areas. And actually, when you kind of compare it to other teams in the league, we do have some of the best coaching setup. So it's pretty good as far as I'm concerned. Like the current setup we have, it would be nice to gain a few more coaches, a bit more specialisation, but compared to everyone else in the league, we really have got a nicely built backroom staff now, which I think is always just something very important to do. As I mentioned, we did pick up 3 scouts. The one role that we're missing is a director of football. I tend not to use one in Football Manager, just generally speaking. I know they can sometimes be good for negotiating deals and such, but it's just not been something that I've ever used with that greater a deal. You can see here we've got a pretty extensive knowledge of our kind of some players that have been scouted. Across the board, I've been trying to do plenty of scouting. You can see here I'm already looking at Canadians with contracts expiring in the near future. Players like Caden Chung is an interesting option who we could potentially go in for. Austin Ritchie as well. He's a good player. Do we need another striker? Probably not. But I have been really trying to build up a good scouting knowledge. You can see if we just look at the senior team, we've not done any scouting here because realistically we're not going to be signing any of these Canadian current internationals. They're all a little out of our budget. But if we switch to the under-20s, you can see I have been doing some extensive scouting here. And actually, definitely worth noting, 2 of our own players are here. Liam Can is one of them. We signed him from Ottawa Fury's academy at the start of the year. He's already looking like a good potential #1 Canadian goalkeeper in the future. And Justin Yard, who's another one of the players who we signed, he was signed from Alliance United in League One Ontario. He looks like he could be a pretty good player as well. Thus far, he's done okay. He's not played a great deal of football for us. But in terms of getting regular international football and hopefully developing, he's definitely a player who I've got on my radar for the future kind of first team. And equally with the under-19s, I'm actually going to start scouting some of these players. But you can see here further kind of representatives from our club. David Doe is in the under-19s. Velado Tsgai as well is in there. Both those players who start at Edmonton at the start of the save game. Namey as well. I think we signed you. Yeah, you can see here we signed him from Vaughan. He's done okay. He's currently our first choice keeper, not in the Canadian Premier League as it says there, but as you can see here in the Alberta Major Soccer League. But yeah, it's good just to have general representatives. In terms of what I was going to talk about, which is assignments, you can see what we've got going on here. We've got 1 scout focused on Canada, 1 focused on our league. We've got our data analyst analysing the next opponent and a scout scouting the next opponent. And we've also got another scout just scouting the whole of North America. But these guys have been throwing up some fairly useful reports. You know, we're getting a good little knowledge, I feel like, built up of North America on the whole. Players like this guy, never would find him, but he looks like he could be okay. His wages probably mean he's a little out of our budget. But nevertheless, it's good just to have kind of scouts like this who are just going around really eyeing up talent and trying to find us the next big thing. I mean, you can see here, we're building up a nice little database, I guess, of knowledge when it comes to Canadian and just North American football as a whole, which is kind of where I want to be. You know, we want to be in a situation where when we do need players, we're not having to necessarily hunt out for them. Rather, we already have them on our radar. We're already aware of them. And that's something that we are trying to make big steps towards here at FC Ed. Anyway, I talked a little bit about a few of our youngsters who have been doing pretty well. I do want to talk about some of the big talents who I'm particularly excited about. Obviously, we talked about players like Velado Tsgai. Another player who I'm excited about, Prince Amanda. He starts at FC Edmonton, one of the best young prospects at the club. You can see he's made 3 starts in the Alberta Major Soccer League and 4 appearances on off the bench. In that competition, we are slaughtering things right now. We're 7-0 when it comes to our record, which is not too bad going, really, is it? You can see here Justin Yard, we talked about before. A few of these players are regens that we picked up right at the very beginning. I've talked about Deshays before, but I have to talk about him again because I think he is the most exciting of the players that we've got. Came from our academy. He was the standout player in the academy at the start. You can see we've got this guy, Izzy Daigle, who looks okay, to be fair, but he does play both fullback positions. But, you know, we'll keep an eye on him. We'll see how he develops at the academy. Maybe he's a player we'll call upon. And besides him, a few other players here. You can see here, Rene Gamache was signed from Winnipeg Youth, which is not a bad signing. He looks like a player with some potential. And this guy, who is listed as our hot prospect right now, I love the look of, Wim... Oh gosh, I've dreaded this moment forever. Vin Vergewen. Vergewen, then? I don't... Did the Dutch say the, or do they say Wim? I feel like they do say W rather than the. That's a German thing. Either way, he's Dutch, but he also has secondary Canadian nationality. And we picked him up from the TSS FC Academy. Now, TSS are a relatively large team in Canada, at least as far as Canadian football goes. So I did want to check out their academy. He was the pick of the bunch there, so we went and picked him up. But really, I don't want to be over-reliant on the regens from academies. But at the same time, I did want to bulk out our under-21s, at least just to start things off. Besides the players we've talked about, there's other players here like Gianni Ferri, who is the top goal scorer across both the senior and under-21 squad. He's got 6 goals so far. This guy, you can see here, we signed him from Windsor for, well, nothing. It was a free transfer, but he was, for a period, playing for Swansea. I think he did actually move over to play for Swansea as well. I added in his face myself, just with, making a face pack for him. And when I was just looking into him, because I was curious, I couldn't actually find anything about why it didn't work out for him at Swansea. He's still a very young player, though, so we'll keep an eye on him. May well be a player who breaks into the first team with time. You can see he is already improving, which is pretty blooming exciting, if you ask me. Anyway, before we get into today's game, we should probably just talk about the games we've had since we were last here. You can see we have played, since that Valor game where we won 4-2, 5 matches. And it's been a bit of a mixed bag, really. The first game we had against York FC was one of the most bizarre games of just this year in FM for me, to be honest. It was weird. Tommy Amiobi picked up a hat-trick. His second goal was bizarre. It came from a missed penalty. And earlier on in the game, he had 2 goals disallowed for offside. So Tommy, he could have got a few more, but nevertheless, a good little performance by the team on the whole. Great clean sheet. Obviously, good to see a different player stepping up and getting goals for us. Now between Amiobi, Diallo and Sakaria, we really have just a variety of footballers who I really feel like we can rely upon. And it was off the back of this result, I must admit. It did spur me on to give Tommy a new contract. Anyway, the next game we had against Forge FC, the opposition that we will be taking on today, was disappointing. They were clinical and we most certainly were not. They really did hit us on the break repeatedly. They created good opportunities and their finishing was very, very good. Forge are one of the better teams in the Canadian Premier League, but at home I would have backed us to do well in this game. And Emery Welshman was the man to put us to the sword. He is actually on loan at Forge FC from FC Cincinnati. So he is a player with some pretty good calibre. And yeah, he was just very, very good on the break. Mortozzi did pick up a consolation for us, but it was not really much of a consolation at all because it came so late on in the game. It didn't really inspire me with any hope, and ultimately, as you can see in the end, it did finish 3-1. You can see Welshman here, looks like a very good player, 12 finishing, good off the ball, very, very good physicals, on loan from FC Cincinnati. And yeah, he's a good player, is Welshman. We're going to have to, well, be wary of him today when we take on Forge. Anyway, the next few games we had were kind of interesting. We took on Blainville in the Canadian Championship. Now, this was a bit of a shock because if we look at Blainville here, you can see they play in the Premier Ligue de Soccer du Quebec. I hope I did that justice. But they actually knocked out Cavalry in the first knockout round of the Canadian Championship. So they'd already taken out one Canadian Premier League team. I was a little bit scared going into this. But in the first leg, we won 5-2, as you can see here. There was one goal that stands out. I will make sure just to put this goal in on its own. It was by Edwini Bonsu. And actually, in this game, we were 1-0 down at half-time. It was a good little fight back. A flurry of late goals put us in good stead. And following on from that, we had 2 more games. We took on Blainville. You can see that finished 2-2. But the game between was against HFX Wanderers, who were bottom of the league. Jonathan Valley with a goal and Sakaria with 2 there. So anyway, today we do take on Forge FC, which is going to be a challenge. You can see if we look at the league table here, they have a game in hand on us. If they were to win that game in hand, they would actually be 1 point clear. And because we've lost to them before, it's absolutely crucial that we beat them today. Not just to try and win the spring season, which with 2 games left after this game against Forge, you'd have to say we're probably in pole position to do. But also, because if we look at the head-to-head CONCACAF League qualifying, it's been interesting. Despite losing to Forge and beating Valor twice, Forge are not ahead of us. And the reason for that is that they have struggled against, Valor. They've slipped up repeatedly. They drew against Valor and they lost against Valor. And as a result, we're in this weird situation now. You can see they've actually lost to them 3 times in the last week because they took them on in the Canadian Championship as well. But between the 3 losses against Valor and the draw against them in the league, we're in this weird situation now where a draw is actually good enough for us today. Now, it's not really good enough for us in terms of the main Canadian Premier League, but a draw in this head-to-head league in the final game today would guarantee us a spot in the North American League qualifying. I've talked about it before in the introduction video for this series, but the North American League is a bit like the Europa League in European football. The difference between the Europa League and the Champions League and basically the North American League and the North American Champions League here in North America is the Europa League takes place for 6 months and then the North American League follows on in the next 6 months. They run, rather than running at the same time, they run one after the other, and if you're successful in the Europa League equivalent, which is the one we would qualify for with a win here, and you finish top 6 in that competition, you go into the Champions League. So this is a chance here to take the first steps towards some North American Champions League football. It will be a long path over the summer, but it's a path that we are, well, going to try and get off on the right foot for. Anyway, today we've got a bit of a challenge because, as I mentioned, we've got Moses and Marcelin both out. Another situation we've got here, Dylan Powley has injured his hip and he's out for 2 to 4 months. So as a result of that, and with our second choice goalkeeper out, I've had to bring in one of the reinforcements, a player we signed on a free transfer, Denis Begovic. Yes, it's literally Begovic's brother. He's not quite as good as Asmir, I'll be honest, but he's part Canadian, and I needed a Canadian goalkeeper. He doesn't have to be registered because he was 18 at the start of the season. He has still since turned 19. But as a result of Powley being injured, this guy is our backup goalkeeper. I don't really want to have to call upon him because that 5 one-on-ones is not great. 1 first touch, 3 passing, 4 kicking, 3... Basically, when he gets the ball, we're going to have issues getting it away. And I thought, third choice keeper, it's not going to matter. Goalkeeper injuries don't happen. With Powley now out for most of the rest of the season, there is cause for some concern. Anyway, this is the team that we've got today. You'll notice that Diallo is not going to be starting, which might seem a little bit odd. But in the last few games, he's been okay, but he's not been playing every single match for us. And as a result of Tommy Amiobi's hat-trick and Sakaria finding some form, they are the 2 players we're going to stick with. You can see Lincourt Joseph is carrying a little bit of an injury. He's actually missed a lot of football recently through a groin strain for 2 weeks, which has seen Lamotte get a bit more of a run out in the team. Now, in the Canadian Premier League, he's not been doing that well, but when he's been playing for the under-21s, he's done very, very well, as you can see. I'm hoping that if we stick with him, show some faith, it's going to be rewarded, so he will be playing for us there. And at the back, there are a few changes as a result of Marcelin and Moses' kind of absences. Alan Zebi, who you might have noticed, is one of the more influential players in the dressing room. He is going to be playing that deep lying kind of midfielder role for us that he's still trying to learn. And at left back, Kyle Walton is going to come into the team. I like Kyle a lot. We'll have to make sure that he can do a good job for us. You can see he's very good in the air, very good when it comes to his marking and tackling as well. His mentals really aren't the best for this level, but he is only 21 with some room to improve, and he'll only improve through having game time. And, well, to boot, he's also left-footed, which is kind of useful at left centre-back. Anyway, a draw here would be good enough for continental qualification. However, it wouldn't be good enough for the spring season split. So, really, I hope you're able to get a rough grasp of the situation, but really, we need to win here. And despite being away from home and despite having lost to Forge not that long ago, I'm pretty optimistic that we should be able to get a result here. So, let's get into this, shall we? Forge FC versus Edmonton. We're playing at the Tim Hortons Stadium. Is it the Tim Hortons? It's Tim Hortons something. They sponsor the ground. And it's actually the biggest ground in the division, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, that might be a lie. Valor's might be bigger. I now think that Valor's stadium in Winnipeg is bigger. Either way, this is one of the bigger stadiums. In real life, it played host to the first ever Canadian Premier League game between Forge FC and, well, York 9. Let's see if we can write ourselves into the history books by qualifying for the North American League through this CONCACAF kind of shootout competition that all comes to a head here as Zayak goes through on goal and scores. A minute in, it's not really the start you wanted. We've got 1% of possession. That just looks a little bit bizarre, doesn't it? But no, not good enough here. You can see Marcel Zayac with the ball threaded through to him. And Kyle Walton has kind of lost his man a little bit there, which is maybe cause for concern. We really do base our game around dominating possession and being just solid in the midfield and dominating the play, which we aren't doing. But against this 5-man midfield of Forge FC, I am anticipating perhaps a little bit of a battle today. This is not going to be plain sailing. Osario's on a booking, Zebi's on a booking as well as the ball-winning midfielder. That does fill me with nerves in a game as big as this one. And it's going to be Becker now to put in the ball. Whips it in, it's headed clear. But it might not be fully clear here, as it's going to be with Trinere. That's probably not how you say his name, but it sounded good. And well, Gutierrez has let us off the hook a little bit there, hasn't he? I did forget to mention it, but in the first game against Blainville, where we were losing at half-time, I did switch to one of our alternate systems. We switched to the 4-2-4, or the 4-2-2-2, if you'd rather call it that, with the two quite advanced wingers. It worked very well, so if we do start hitting a wall, I feel like that is the kind of first course of action to switch to that. Although Ziyech is through again, Connor James, with a fantastic stopping goal, is currently keeping us in this game. Despite how dominant we've been, we are right now struggling a little bit, and that is a tiny bit concerning if you ask me. I'm going to switch Zebi to a ball-winning to a deep-lying midfielder on defend. I feel like as a ball-winning midfielder on support, he's probably pushing up a little bit too far. I want him to be the player to cut out the passing lanes to Ziyech up top. I want him to be the player who isolates their lone forward. And I feel like as a ball-winning midfielder on support, he's perhaps been caught out and been, well, dragged into the battle in the midfield. You can see here how he is moving around. I want him sat in this space here, which he's not really doing a great job of. And some of that will be down to the lack of familiarity with the position and role as much as anything. As we're let off the hook again. You can see at Tim Hortons Field, Hamilton, Ontario, Forge are 1-0 up at the break. And we've not even had a shot on target. I can see Forge being the big rivals for us. They are definitely one of the bigger teams in the Canadian Premier League, and I think that's represented in Football Manager as well. And what I mean by bigger is they have a bit more... I don't want to say like they're a better team because it's so early on in the season in real life, but they just look like a well-oiled machine that's just going to take a little bit of time to get going. And they have some quality in their team, like Roberts in goal, for example, who in Football Manager is absolutely exceptional. I feel like there's got to come a point here where I start to make tactical changes, and to be honest, I feel like I'm going to be dragged into them now, which might be a little bit soon, but let's go with it. So we're going to bring in Bruno Zebi to play out on the left. Alan Zebi is now going to play on the left-back position in his natural kind of area. I'm just wondering if... Actually, I should probably swap him with Soria and then drop Soria in and have Walton out. Zebi is right-footed anyway. I am someone who likes to have... a right-footed player at right-back, a left-footed player at left-back. So we'll make that change there. Lamotte, I think I'm going to take off. He's not had the greatest of games, although Bonsu's not had the best game either. I'm going to bring in Valet and then swap him with more Totsi. Am I happy with this? I don't want to make all our changes at once, but I feel like we've got to roll the dice just a little bit in this game. It's clearly not working. This might leave us with some trouble in the midfield. We'll have to keep an eye on that, but being a little more aggressive in our play, I think, can benefit us, particularly given how, tired you can see here the Forge FC team are versus our own. Becker whips in the ball here, though. Set piece off the crossbar. We are being let off the hook, although Becker had another fantastic opportunity there. Connor James to the rescue. We are not playing well right now. We have not turned up in this game, and it's a little bit painful to see. 20 minutes left. We've probably got to go more attacking as well. We need a goal in this game. Really, the main focus now has got to be getting that one goal that we need for continental football. It would not be a disaster not to get it this year, because I don't think we were the favourites coming into it. But I would not be particularly happy about it, to say the least. Anyway, we're going to make a few changes just with roles to the forwards. I'm going to move Diallo into the team and put him as an advanced forward. And Sakaria is going to switch to poacher in, well, really one last roll of the dice here. We need a late goal. And I just don't think it's going to come here. Forge FC have been very, very good this year. They've shown it here. And unfortunately for us, the North American League, at least this season, was not meant to be. And maybe that's a benefit. Maybe this now gives us a chance to walk before we run, because the summer could have been very tricky with an extra competition, but it does still feel pretty disappointing to miss out on that. And given that this is a one-year tournament, for all future years the winner of the league and the championship will get that continental spot, it would have been nice to etch our name into the trophy that will be awarded for this. And we'll see ourselves as the overall victors in the playoffs, which unfortunately we're going to fall short of. You can see here we've got plenty of scouting going on here. Right now I'm scouting all the players with 1 year left on their contract, and we're going through all the different teams within the Canadian Premier League just to get a good idea of who's available and potentially at what price. See if there's any players who would really be worth signing. Someone like Telfer here, contract's expiring soon, although that is his loan contract, so maybe he's not available. Although actually it does look like his contract at Toronto will be expiring. So come the end of the month, he could be a player we could look at signing if we wanted to. But in honesty, that is a little far away from now. I feel like we need to retarget and refocus. So we do finish runner-up in the CONCACAF qualifying, which is disappointing. Edmonton, Forge FC, I can already see them being an FC Edmonton rival for years to come. In terms of when we'll be back, we've got the Canadian Championship quarter-final. We've been drawn against Ottawa Fury in the quarter-final. Now, they are one of our rivals. You can see here, they play in the USL Championship, so they play in the American system. They are, I guess, the fourth biggest Canadian team competing outside of the Canadian Premier League. And they are considered one of our big rivals. You can see a historic rival against them because FC Edmonton used to play in the same divisions as the Ottawa Fury when both clubs competed in America. With that in mind, I feel like we have to come back for the game against them. That is not that far away. We might double it up with the game against Cavalry FC. I don't think I'm going to see out the rest of the spring split here. We've got 2 games left, with Forge having a game in hand. I don't think there's a way that we can win this split, unfortunately. But perhaps it's a good little reality check, because we did run away with things it felt like early on. And you can see how quickly this stage has kind of flipped. Just 2 defeats against the same team has left us in a situation now where they're pretty much guaranteed to win that split, despite our emphatic victories in some of the other games that we've had. Anyway, hopefully I see you guys next time out for the game against Ottawa. Should be a good one. If you are enjoying the episodes, as always, do drop a like on it. Let me know what you make of the team so far. What do you think of the 3-1-4-2? Who are the standout players for you? I didn't mean to make that rhyme. I'm just turning into a lyrical MC. Let's end things here. Thank you for watching, folks. I'll see you again soon. It is me, Jack, and I will talk to you guys in a bit. I'm out.